My name is David Whitlock. For those of you who don't know me, I write the Stuttgart Market Letter. It's a daily market update of all the Porsche auctions from the night before. I've been doing it for about 3 years now, a little over 3 years. I've written over 1,000 issues, and I've got well over 20,000 Porsche auctions in my database. But I've always been just a huge auction nerd, absolutely obsessed with the car market since I was 8 years old, always tracking prices. But Porsche has really always been in my DNA. My wife and I were actually both third-generation PCA members, and we're raising a fourth generation now. This was Palm Springs, and we got the whole family together. There's 31 of us in this photo, and one in the oven. Kit, who's been born since then, is now going to his first parade this year up at Lake Placid. So we're really looking forward to that. But somewhere, right. Yeah. Oh yeah, to the right, the tall, the third tallest, in the back. There we go. I do exist. A little bushier beard looks like in there. But enough about me. Let's talk about the market. So. Again, I was here last year. This is kind of where we left off. We went over, the Porsche market from about 2006 until February 2025. And as you can see, there was a huge spike post-COVID when it peaked in 2022 and then kind of went a little bit of this, a little sideways. Some of the Porsches went up, some of them went down, some of them remained fairly flat. The ones that went up, they all shared wrong computer. Very similar characteristics. Too many computers up here. The cars that really took off or continue to take off post 2022 all had either one or two of these or a combination of these. Things like limited edition cars. So we've got a 964, looks like America Roadster up there. Only 250 or some odd of those were built. They continued to climb after 22. While your run-of-the-mill 964 cabriolets kept going sideways, and then your Tiptronic cars got a little bit softer after that rise from 2020 to 2022. Also, special colors. The car right there is just a 928S. It's not a GTS 5-speed, which you would expect to be like the creme of the creme, but that car had 82,000 miles on it, and it sold for like $145,000. And that was because that car was Lindgren metallic with a beautiful brown and Pasha interior. And even since then, we've had some great 928s with that Pasha interior. Original Pasha interiors do really well. Even some of your just normal run-of-the-mill cars, the super low mileage cream puffs, they continue to do well. So if there was 100 944 turbos sold over the last year, that 24,000 mile car with original paint, all the service records, it completely outperformed the market, even with the regular 944 turbos just kind of keeping on an even path there. We also discussed the generational shift that we've seen over the last few years, where we see our cars from the 1950s, 1960s, especially at the higher end of the market, so your 60s race cars, have really struggled to sell, really struggled to bring the money, whereas 90s and early to mid Audis cars have done quite well and have had another jump, in fact, over the last month or two. That's continued throughout 2025. And then end of the era cars. So Porsche's not making any more non-GT, normally aspirated 911s, and especially with manual transmissions. So those cars, people are taking notice and they're buying them. Prices are going up. The car pictured right there, of course, is like one of 60 club coupes that was based on the GTS. So it's got the bumped up engine, limited production, and I think less of those cars, at least that I've seen come to market, are manual versus PDK. So those cars have done really well, and I'd love to see a manual come to market sometime soon. But let's go. Where did we end up on 2025? So even before December, we had already broken all of 2024's records, whether it was dollar volume or unit volume, and 2024 was pretty much in line with what we saw at that peak in 2022. We saw $563 million in sales and transactions in 2025. That's both online and our legacy in-person auctions. 7,500 cars, so about 300 more than the previous year, but it produced another $100,000 in sales. So it was a really, really strong market. What was also very noticeable about the 2025 market was the sell-through rate. We were consistently at a sell-through rate of above 70%. We ended the year at a combined sell-through rate of 72%, and that's the first time we've had that in quite some time. And that has even continued into 2026, which is very nice to see. So I wanted to go over our top 5 sales of 2025. And rounding out, the highest price paid for a Porsche was a 1989 Roof CTR. So this one hit a lot of the items I had talked about earlier. There were roughly 29 original W09 roof binned CTR, so it's a very limited production. This one in particular had about 1,000 miles on it, and of course it's finished in Blossom Yellow, which is that famous yellow bird yellow. So it ticked a lot of boxes. Plus, we hadn't seen a roof CTR come to market since probably like 2017, 2018. So this was a first, and the market was hungry for CTRs, which is a good thing.
Do you remember how many miles were on the car?
1,000, roughly 1,000 miles. Yep. This is another one. Somebody drove this one though. This was another one. This one had 23,000 miles on it. Again, this car was in Blossom Yellow, so you can see where the 1,000 miles versus 23,000 miles auctions only a few months apart had about $1 million effect on the vehicle there. So that one was driven. And then we have, oh no, look, another roof. 2025 was the year of the roof, obviously. This was the 3rd CTR that we saw come to market. And this particular car actually had less mileage than the car that hit number 2. This one had 11,000 miles on it, but it was a different color. My generation, we grew up playing Gran Turismo, and that's where we first experienced the roof Yellowbird. That car was Blossom Yellow. The car that was on the cover of the Road and Track magazine for that high-speed run where it beat all the top cars, that car was Blossom Yellow. That was the car that coined the term Yellowbird. So you can see, even though this particular example had less mileage by like half of the one number 2, that color really played a part in this sale. Can anybody guess what the 4th most expensive car sold was? Based on, oh, wait. Surprise! Just when I said this was over now. So we actually saw, I was really happy to see, Spyder do really well. Spyders are my favorite Porsches. But it took a really, 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 really good example to get the sale through at a number the seller was willing to transact at. This was a numbers matching car sold by RM Sotheby's. It was one of 6 or so vehicles imported into the US for racing for 1960, and it had quite the racing history from 60 through roughly 65 or 66. So there's still, a lot of Spyders did not sell that came to auction last year. We did see some 904s transact, which was good. But it took the really, really, really special ones to get up there into like the top rung of what we saw at auction. Okay, back to roofs. All right, the 5th most expensive car that sold here last year was this 2021 Roof CTR Anniversary. Now, these cars were actually built in-house by Roof. They're no longer using the white bodies from Porsche. This is a full carbon tub car, and a handful of these were built to celebrate the 25th anniversary of the original Roof CTR. And in fact, the number 6 car is also a Roof CTR anniversary. So 5 out of the top 6 cars that sold last year were Roof cars. But that being said, the 2025 market, in my opinion, was a turbocharged market all through the different turbo range. We saw the 993 Turbo do exceedingly well, especially towards the second half of the year. The average prices, as you can see, kept on climbing. The average price, I can't even see my own computer. Average price increase, this is the second half of the year versus the first half. The average price increased by $86,000. We saw a new low high, a new high high. So the market kept on going up and up. That $500,000 no sale actually recently didn't sell again, but like 300 and change. That was an oops bid. So interesting, go back and read that, yes.
Could you explain sell-through rate?
Sell-through rate. So 5 or 4 cars come to auction, 3 cars sell, 75% of the cars sold. So that's a sell-through rate.
Great,
Yep, very welcome. Some of the standout 993 turbos, it was really driven by low mileage. We had some standout colors. Arena Red, that's the poster car, kills bugs fast. Those cars did really, really well. And then we had that Japanese Market 1997 car there. It says Turbo S in the listing. It really wasn't a Turbo S. So apparently the cars that were bound for Japan, they then put Turbo S options like the X50 and then the X71 for the intakes on it. But it still did really, really well. I mean, the car had quite some mileage on it and still ended up in the top 5. So 993 turbos did well, but there's actually quite a few of those. They made roughly 6,000 or so 993 turbos. So not quite that limited. What was quite limited were 964 turbo 3.6s. About 1,500 or some odd of these were sold. These had another big back half of 2025, as you can see on those sales there. Their market gains were, I mean, absolutely incredible. The high went up 6 months over the previous 6 months period by $350,000, average price over $250,000. And that, again, was driven by low mileage cars. You can see these cars, sub 10,000 miles that sold over the last 6 months. But even in that previous 6-month bucket, we still had cars that were under 10,000 miles. So it was a really good apples to apples comparison on just how much the Turbo 3.6 jumped over that period. Also interesting to note in these top 5, even though something like the mid-mileage cars, 30,000 miles, they're also above $500,000, where that wasn't, really the case 12, 18 months ago. So a big surge in 2025 for the air-cooled turbos. The last of the air-cooled with turbos with that 993, and then more of a limited production turbo with the Turbo 3.6. Also, the bad boy car. People like those black ones. I like those. Biggest surprise for me, I think, was probably the 99 1.2 GT2 RS. These are more limited than the Turbo 3.6, so roughly 1,000 GT2 RSs or so. But with these, every single one is pretty much a low mileage car. Collectors bought these right out of the gate. A lot of people kept mileage off them, but they had a really, really good 2025. You can see lows made new highs, highs, of course, made new highs, and that was driven by, of course, low mileage, but they're all low mileage. We had quite a few PTS cars that did really well. There was a Manti racing package car in there as well. Now, you see that way more often on GT3s and GT4s, so to see one on a GT2 RS was quite interesting and really drove the price up. But I think the biggest surprise of this whole market for me was that 939-mile car over there. Yes, it's low mileage, but it doesn't have a Whitlock package. It's just like a bare bones car. And that even brought over $500,000, which is pretty impressive. I always kind of joke, I think the non-Whitlock cars are going to be worth more in the future because everybody chose the Whitlock package. You rarely see one of these non-Whitlock cars, but it did exceedingly well, and that was good to see. All right. Now for some non-turbo GT cars. Overall, GT3s were a mixed bag in 2025. I was really excited this past year to see 996.1 GT3 prices because this is a car we never got here in the U.S. and it finally turned 25 years old. I have data, of course, from overseas and whatnot, but these are the cars that were here in the U.S. and sold here in the U.S. on U.S. auction sites. And I was a little surprised at the slow start these cars had, especially those first 2 cars to cross the block. The first one no-sailed at about $106,000. You had another car follow that pretty closely, at a little under $100,000. But that next car at $145,000, that was the same car that no-sailed at $106,000. So I think people started to pay attention. It is a small data set. I'm looking forward to see what 2026 brings as more of these get into the US. I've seen a number for sale on some of the websites, around the country. I know Merit Partners has one, and their stuff will eventually push on to maybe one of the auction websites. But it's interesting to see what the 996.1 GT3 does. The .2, 996.2 GT3s did well too. 997s did well. I consider those like the more of the analog GT3s before you get into the 991, 992s. And interestingly, 997.1 GT3 RSs did really, really well in the beginning of the year. And then all of a sudden, nothing happened. So what happened here was this got hot right out of the gate. We had some super low mileage cars in some excellent, excellent specs. So, I mean, there's nothing better than a .1 GT3 RS in that green, except for on Halloween, then you gotta have orange. But those are the cars that sold earlier in the year, and the cars that followed towards the latter half of the year, they were your typical white, silver cars. I think the sellers might have had some inflated expectations over what the car's value would be, and that's why they didn't accept the bids. But even when you look at those bids that they didn't accept, they were still really strong compared to the year before. So GT3s, yeah, or 997s, 996s, doing well. Like I said, I consider those like more the analog GT3s, where the GT3s kind of start to go separate ways is when we start to look at the newer GT3s.
Question.
Yep.
Before you go there, I mean, those are all fairly low mileage cars, kind of leading me to believe they probably weren't tracked. For GT3s that are actually tracked, are there different ones, or are those all the ones pretty much that sold on any of the...
Those are all of them. Even the one, even go back here. Yeah, this is every online auction sale since, when did I go back? March 2025. Yep. This is all the online sales. So even ones that have been tracked. In my data, I do have the modified cars, like heavily modified cars I'll pull out if they have engine work done to it, like if it's bumped up to a 4.0 and it was originally a 3.6 or a 3.8, and I'll pull that out of the data because I don't want to cloud it, because that really moves the needle. But yeah, you'll have even the track cars, like with a roll cage, will be in there as well in this data set. All right, 992.2 GT3 Tourings. This reflects the touring market, reflects the wing car market. They're having a tough time. They came out of the gate and they weren't bringing the bids that obviously sellers were looking for. I think sellers had memories of the 991 GT3 market where you were seeing $100,000 over sticker. Well, that sticker's gone up a lot. So that delta kind of has gotten a little bit smaller. But as we got into 2026, starting to see the cars sell. We saw 2 recent GT3 Touring sell, wing car sell. So I think expectations are starting to line up with where the market is, and I think we'll continue to see those sell as well. But it wasn't just the .2 GT3s. It's something that I'm seeing in the market across the 992.2 range. If you think 991 Targa GTSs, that was a super, super hot seller. Your dealers were sometimes charging over for a .1 GTS that had a great, after the sale, secondary market did really well. But these days, you can go and find a brand new Targa 4 GTS sitting on a showroom floor. I've seen a few. I know one Porsche Center has 3 unsold cars incoming, and that's kind of reflected in the market. We're seeing a lot of the 992.2s just not sell, and that's, like I said, it's across the board. We've had a couple recently .2 Carrera T cabriolets, so it's a brand new model. The T's were always the coupes up until now, and we haven't seen those really find homes either. So .2s, I think we're not gonna see that same market demand that we saw 2 years ago. Eventually sellers that really, really want to sell their car, who are just looking for the quick flip, they start to readjust their expectations, and we'll start to see these sell down as well. I want to take a look at a few more. What time is it? Okay, we're good. We're good on time. Go back to talk about the classics a little bit. of all the classics, I mean, is the 912 short wheelbase coupe, I think, showed real promise. I mean, there's a number of cars up there in 2025 that sold for over $100,000. If you told somebody that this was going to happen 5 years ago, they probably would have laughed at you. But it continued. So it continued from the first half and the second half. These averages, the second half averages, do look slightly low, but we did have a lot more project cars in the second half than we did the first half, so that brought the average down, and that's why we see that lower low and that high. Well, somebody didn't want to bid $100,000 at 912. That's all. But pretty much flat, but still seeing some really, really nice cars sell. What was also impressive about the 912 market was the sell-through rate. I mean, 85%, I mean, the 912s absolutely beat out the averages, whereas we look at other classics like Porsche 356s, they are continuing to kind of struggle to sell. Prices have remained fairly flat, but they've kind of been around that 50 to 60% sell-through rate for your average 356s, like a 356 coupe. Now your 356 Carrera 2, we've had 4 across the block, 3 of them sold, 1 of them sold twice. So that's a solid sell-through rate, but there's only 4 sales there. But looking at 356C coupes, those driver quality cars, they've kind of been floating in that $60,000 to $85,000 range. And of course, the extremely nice, recently restored cars are bringing above $100,000. And the matching numbers engine cars and those restored ones, those are still going to be the creme of the creme up there. So I'm seeing this across, all 356B coupes. Notchbacks, they don't do too well. I like those a lot though, but there's a little bit of trend analysis over the last 6 months for 356C. So what else about 2026? So I made 2 predictions in my market letter at the end of 2025. My first prediction was that we will not see the same unit volume for 2026. 7,500 cars was a heck of a lot. It is a lot of cars across the block. The first 2 weeks of 2026, it looked like I was right. The first 2 weekends, I barely had enough cars to fill a newsletter with. Only 3 cars sold that first weekend in 2026, and then the floodgates opened. I was wrong. There are a ton of cars coming to market. We beat January 2025, and we're beating February 2025. So that prediction, I didn't do too so well. The other prediction I had, still got time to see how this one goes. That's more of a long-term trend, is that Boxsters and Caymans are going to start to have their year. You have a number of things going on with that market. Are we going to get a new Boxster and Cayman? Are we not going to get a new Boxster and Cayman? Is it going to be electric? I don't know. Is it going to be an ICE car? If we do get the ICE car, that's still a few years off. So I think that whole dilemma is going to have an effect on the Boxster and Cayman market. Now, I don't think it's going to have an effect on things like a 987.1 or a 986 just because they made so many of those cars. Like, they made a lot, so they're not limited. This market will eventually flatten out, and we'll find a floor. I don't think you're going to see huge rises here, but then when you think back to what drove the other models, the special cars, and you look at something like a 987.1 Boxster RS Spyder, this is where I think the market is going to start to go up. This car, they only made 1,960 of these. It had a little more horsepower than your standard car, and it came in a ridiculously good-looking color combination of GT silver over red, so it has a lot going for it. And we've already really started to see this start to move a little bit. So we have a new high, a new average price, and I'm sure we're going to start seeing higher lows as the year goes on for this. Other examples of special edition Boxsters, you have the limited edition cars, those bright orange Boxsters. We already saw one over the last few months do exceedingly well, but it was like a 2,000 or 3,000 mile car, and we haven't had one of those in practically forever. The 550 Spyder editions, another one to keep our eye on. And then I'm also keeping my eye on these 981 Cayman GT4s. So these are the first generation GT4. They made quite a few of them, like 5,000, 6,000, maybe a couple thousand came to the United States. But we're already seeing these, start to move. We've seen much, much higher highs. We've seen the average price go up. Again, with this one, we're still looking for higher lows. Yes?
Just real quickly, can you explain the negative price there at the low?
Yep. So this means, so in the past 6 months, our low is $11,500 lower than the low from the previous 6 months. Yep, so it's a trend analysis. When I say looking for a higher low, it's like you look for the low to just inch higher and higher up in line with the highs getting higher and higher up to show that the market as a whole is starting to shift up a little bit. So that's what I'm looking at there. So Cayman GT4s, I think they will start to move up again. Not exactly limited, but $100,000 average. That's a lot of car for the money. This one, it's really going to depend on where the 718 Cayman GT4 goes. You want to see that step up because it's got to fill the gap into that car. But what's affecting 718s right now is GT4 RS pricing. Even over like the last 12, 18 months, GT4 RSs have kind of gotten softer. It's been a tough sell. So like if you look at the market, the highs are going down and the low looks like it's going up. That's only because people aren't taking those bids right there. If people took those bids that low, we'd have lower lows showing that the market for the GT4 RSs are going down. And it has nothing to do with like the cars that we're getting at auction. So that $38,000 lower high, we're still seeing quality cars at auction because these 6 cars sold in that last 6 months bunch. There's a couple PTS cars in there. There's a sub-1,000 mile car in there. There's even a Manthey Racing Package car in there. And it's just getting a lot softer. So once these kind of start to level out, hit their floor, and 718, the regular Cayman GT4 starts to move a little bit, then I think the 981s will start pushing up in the market as well. So that is pretty much, look back at 2025, where I see 2026 going. I write about this every day. Feel free if you want, subscribe to the newsletter, a little QR code right there. And any questions you have, more than happy to answer them. I guess it's time to get some prizes. Y'all stuck around. Perfect, thank you.